Part 3, Understanding Through Distance. 3 days passed before Nari and Taiyang were allowed to see each other again. 3 days during which official apologies were drafted, cultural experts were consulted, and the Galactic Council debated whether the incident constituted a diplomatic crisis. 3 days during which both of them thought about almost nothing else. Nari found herself unable to concentrate on any of her other duties. Her delegation was scheduled to meet with representatives from 4 other species, but she moved through those meetings like a ghost. She smiled at the right times, said the appropriate words, but her mind was elsewhere. At night, alone in her quarters, she would stand in front of the mirror and trace the places where Taiyang's arms had been, trying to understand her own reaction. On the second night, she called for Hana. Her aide arrived promptly, maintaining the proper distance as always. "I need to ask you something personal," Nari said. "You mentioned once that you had an incident with a Draxian merchant." Accidental contact. Hana's skin shifted slightly, showing discomfort at the memory. "Yes?" During the trade negotiations on Station Kiros, he was gesturing and his arm brushed against mine. It only lasted a moment. How did it feel? Unpleasant, wrong, like static electricity across my skin, but worse. I withdrew immediately and explained our customs. He was apologetic. Hana studied Nari carefully. "Why are you asking?" Nari turned away, looking out at the stars again. It had become her habit these past days. "Because I am trying to understand what happened." The human touched me. By all our customs, by everything I was taught, I should have felt what you felt. Revulsion. Violation. But I did not, Hana. That is what troubles me. What did you feel? I do not know. Shock, certainly. Fear, confusion. But underneath all of that was something else. Something I have no words for. Nari wrapped her arms around herself. "Do you think something is wrong with me?" Hana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than usual. "I think perhaps you felt what the human intended. He meant to offer welcome, warmth, safety. Perhaps those emotions carried through despite the inappropriate method of delivery. Is that possible? I do not know. We are taught from childhood that unwanted touch is always harmful. But what if the touch was not unwanted? What if some part of you accepted the gesture, even though your mind knew it was wrong?" The suggestion hung in the air between them. Nari turned to look at her aide, seeing the concern in her expression. "If the High Council knew I was thinking these things, they would recall me immediately. They would say I have been compromised. Then we will not tell them. Nari, you are the finest ambassador of your generation. You have spent your life learning to understand other species, to see through their eyes. Perhaps this is part of that learning. The humans clearly have a very different relationship with physical contact. Understanding that does not make you less Veltharan." Nari wanted to believe that. She truly did, but she could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted inside her during those 3 seconds of embrace. In the human quarters, Taiyang was having similar struggles. He had written and rewritten his formal apology 17 times. Each version felt inadequate. How could words express the depth of his regret for hurting someone he had only wanted to welcome? His sister Yuna had arrived from Earth on the second day, summoned as a xenoanthropology expert to help navigate the crisis. She found Taeyang in his room, surrounded by datapads displaying different versions of his apology. "You need to sleep," she said, sitting down across from him but leaving space between them. Even his sister had learned to be careful about physical contact in these past days. "I cannot. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. That look of complete shock. Yuna, I hurt her. You made a mistake. A significant one, yes, but a mistake born of ignorance, not malice." Yuna picked up one of the datapads and read through his latest apology attempt. "This is good. Heartfelt and sincere. But I am not sure an apology alone will fix this. What else can I do? You can learn. Really learn. Not just read a briefing packet. The Veltharans have lived for 10,000 years with minimal physical contact. They have built an entire civilization around distance and formality. That is not wrong, Taeyang. It is just different from our way. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But how can any species thrive without touch? Humans need it. Babies who are not held fail to develop properly. Studies show that physical affection reduces stress, strengthens bonds, promotes healing. How do they live without that?" Yuna smiled sadly. "They have other ways. I have been studying their cultural practices. Their ceremonies are elaborate and beautiful. They have art forms we cannot even imagine. They communicate through color patterns on their skin, through precise body language, through rituals that have meaning we are only beginning to understand. They do not need touch the way we do because they have other forms of connection. But Nari felt something when I hugged her. I know she did. It was not just fear. How do you know? Because I was holding her. I felt her body react. First there was tension, yes, but then for just a moment she relaxed. Just a fraction, but I felt it. And her eyes when I stepped back. They were not just afraid. They were confused, like she did not understand her own reaction. Yuna leaned back, considering. That is interesting. It is possible that despite their cultural conditioning, Velthrans still have some biological response to physical contact. Or perhaps Nari is simply more open-minded than most of her people. Either way, you will have a chance to find out. The Galactic Council has mandated a joint appearance tomorrow. Both of you will present the incident as a learning opportunity for interspecies relations. I am to stand in front of the entire council and explain how I accidentally assaulted a foreign ambassador. You are to stand in front of the council and show that two species with very different customs can move past a misunderstanding with grace and mutual respect. The council wants this to work, Taeyang. Humanity is too important to dismiss and the Veltharans are too influential to offend. You and Nari have become the face of this relationship, whether you wanted to or not. After Yuna left, Taeyang sat alone with his thoughts. He had chosen the diplomatic service because he believed in building bridges between species. He believed that underneath all the different forms and customs, all beings wanted the same basic things. Connection, understanding, to be seen and valued. But what if he was wrong? What if some gaps were too wide to bridge? What if his instinct to reach out and connect was fundamentally incompatible with species who valued distance and formality? His communicator chimed with an incoming message. He checked it, expecting another briefing document from Commander Minji. Instead, he saw it was from Nari. His heart began to beat faster as he opened it. The message was short and formal. Ambassador Taeyang, I understand we are required to make a joint appearance before the Galactic Council tomorrow. Before we face them, I believe we should speak privately. I have requested use of Observation Deck 7. It has a divider that can be raised between us, allowing conversation while maintaining appropriate distance. Will you meet me there in 1 hour? Taeyang read the message 3 times. She wanted to talk to him. Not through official channels, not with their aides present, but just the two of them. That had to be a positive sign. He sent back a simple response. I will be there. The observation deck was empty when Taeyang arrived. It was a small room with windows on one side, looking out at the stars and a transparent partition down the middle. He could see Nari on the other side, her back to him, looking out at space. Even from behind, even through the transparent barrier, she looked elegant. Her ceremonial robes flowed around her like water, and her skin showed a soft, steady blue that his research told him indicated calmness. Ambassador Nari, he said quietly. She turned to face him. They stood on opposite sides of the barrier, close enough to see each other clearly but separated by the physical divide. It felt like a metaphor for their entire situation. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice was different than he remembered from their brief encounter. Less formal, more uncertain. Of course. Nari, before we talk about anything else, I need to say this. I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I did. I know that an apology cannot undo the harm, but please believe that I never meant to hurt you. In my culture, what I did is a gesture of welcome and warmth. I now understand that in your culture it is a violation. The fault is entirely mine for not ensuring I understood your customs before acting. Nari was quiet for a moment, her skin shifting through subtle color variations. Your apology is accepted, but I did not ask you here for an apology. I asked you here because I need to understand something. Anything. Ask me anything. Why do humans touch each other so much? The question was direct, almost childlike in its simplicity.
I have been watching videos of your people, reading your literature, studying your customs.
You touch constantly. When you greet. When you celebrate. When you mourn. Even strangers touch each other. Why? Taeyang moved closer to the barrier, close enough to see the small color shifts in her skin. I have been asking myself the opposite question. How do you live without it? But I will try to answer. For humans, touch is communication. Part 2. The embrace that changed everything. The moment stretched like elastic, threatening to snap. Taeyang held Nari in what he considered a brief, friendly, welcome embrace. completely unaware that he had just committed what the Veltherans considered a profound violation. To him, the hug lasted perhaps 3 seconds. To Nari, it felt like an eternity compressed into a heartbeat. When Tae Yang finally released her and stepped back, his smile still in place, he was met with a scene of barely controlled chaos. The Veltharan guards had their hands on their weapons, energy fields crackling to life around their gauntlets. Hana had actually drawn a ceremonial blade halfway from its sheath, her face twisted in horror and rage. The other members of the Veltharan delegation stood frozen, their skin colors shifting through patterns of alarm. On the human side, confusion reigned. Commander Minji had moved forward instinctively, her hand raised in a calming gesture. Daewon had positioned himself between Tae Yang and the Veltharan guards, his diplomatic training warring with his protective instincts. The human security personnel had not drawn weapons yet, but their posture had shifted to alert readiness. Nari stood at the center of it all, her arms hanging at her sides, her eyes wide and unfocused. Her skin had settled into a swirling pattern of colors that none of the humans could interpret, but that her own people recognized immediately. She was in shock, her emotions cascading too fast for her body to display properly. Tae Yang's smile faded as reality crashed in on him. Something had gone terribly wrong, but he could not understand what. He had offered a greeting, nothing more. Why did everyone look like he had just declared war? Ambassador Nari, he said carefully, I apologize if I have offended in some way. That was not my intention. Nari heard his voice as if from a great distance. The ghost of his touch still burned on her shoulders, her back everywhere their bodies had made contact. No one had touched her like that since she was a small child in her mother's arms. The sensation was not painful exactly, but it was overwhelming. Her species experienced physical contact with far greater intensity than most others. It was why they had built an entire culture around avoiding it. Hana stepped forward, placing herself between Nari and Tae Yang. When she spoke, her voice shook with barely controlled fury. Do you have any idea what you have just done? Touching an ambassador without permission, without warning, without any regard for protocol. This is an act of profound disrespect. Tae Yang felt his stomach drop. He looked past Hana to Nari, who still had not moved or spoken. I did not know. I swear I did not know. Our cultural packet did not explain. Your ignorance does not excuse the violation, Hana snapped. Commander Minji stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. This appears to be a serious misunderstanding. Perhaps we should adjourn and reconvene once we have had time to review the proper protocols. Adjourn? One of the Veltharan guards spoke up, his voice harsh. This human has assaulted our ambassador. There must be consequences. Assaulted? Daewon interjected. He offered a greeting. A friendly gesture. How is that assault? Friendly? Hana's voice rose. You call forcing unwanted physical contact on someone friendly? The argument was beginning to spiral out of control. Accusations flew back and forth. The humans tried to explain their customs of greeting. The Veltharans tried to make the humans understand the severity of what had happened, but neither side could truly grasp the other's perspective. To the humans, a hug was so innocent, so normal that calling it assault seemed absurd. To the Veltharans, the uninvited touch was a violation of the most fundamental boundary. Through it all, Nari remained silent. Her mind was working frantically, trying to process what had happened and what it meant. The embrace had been wrong. Every instinct she had was screaming that it was wrong. And yet beneath the shock and the confusion, she could not deny one simple fact. The embrace had not hurt. It had not repulsed her the way she had been taught unwanted contact should. Instead, it had felt warm and solid and strangely safe. This realization terrified her more than anything else. Finally, Nari found her voice. It came out softer than she intended, but it cut through the arguing. Stop! Everyone fell silent, turning to look at her. She straightened her posture, forcing her skin to settle into a more controlled pattern. An ambassador did not fall apart in front of foreign delegates no matter what had happened. This meeting is suspended, she said. Both delegations will return to their quarters. My people and I need time to discuss what has occurred. Hana started to protest, but Nari silenced her with a look. Tae Yang opened his mouth to apologize again, but Commander Minji placed a hand on his shoulder and shook her head slightly. The two groups separated, retreating to opposite sides of the station. The neutral zone was left empty, the warm welcome that had been planned now a diplomatic disaster. In the Veltharan quarters, Nari dismissed everyone except Hana. The two of them stood in Nari's private room, maintaining their proper distance even in this moment of crisis. "We should return home immediately," Hana said. "Report this incident to the High Council. The humans have shown themselves to be barbaric and unsuitable for diplomatic relations." Nari walked to the window and stared out at the stars. She could still feel the echo of Taeyang's arms around her. Did you see his face when he realized something was wrong? What does that matter? He committed a violation. He did not know, Nari said quietly. He truly did not know. You saw the confusion in his eyes. To him, whatever he did was normal. Natural, even. That makes it worse, not better. A species that casually violates personal boundaries without even realizing it is dangerous. Nari turned to face her aide. Or perhaps they simply have different boundaries than we do. Hana, we have spent the last 3 years studying alien species. We know that not everyone shares our customs. The Draxians bow to each other. The Krillians exchange breath. The Thornians interlock fingers. Every species has its own way of showing respect and greeting. None of those involve surprise physical contact. Do they not? The Krillians stand very close to exchange breath. The Thornians must touch to interlock fingers. We accept those customs because we studied them, prepared for them, but we did not properly study the humans and they did not properly study us. This was a failure of communication, not an attack. Hana was quiet for a moment. What are you saying? I am saying that I want to continue this assignment. Nari straightened her shoulders. I will not return home in disgrace because of a misunderstanding. We will demand a full explanation of human customs. We will provide them with a complete guide to our own. And we will try again. The council will not approve. Then I will convince them. Hana, humanity is new to the Galactic Council, but they have potential. Their technology, their adaptability, their passion. We cannot afford to make enemies of them over an innocent mistake. And I cannot afford to fail on my first major assignment. What Nari did not say was that she needed to understand what had happened in that embrace. She needed to know why it had not felt the way it was supposed to feel. Why, despite everything she had been taught, part of her had not wanted Taeyang to let go. In the human quarters, Taeyang sat with his head in his hands while Commander Minji paced the room. Daewon was reviewing every piece of cultural data they had on the Veltharans, trying to find what they had missed. I destroyed everything, Taeyang said. My first major diplomatic assignment, and I destroyed it in 3 seconds. You could not have known, Minji said, though her voice was tight with frustration. The information was not in the briefing. This is a failure of intelligence gathering, not of your conduct. Does that matter? I heard her. Did you see her face? Her skin was going through all those colors. I terrified her. Daewon looked up from his reading. According to this, Veltharan skin displays emotional states through chromatic shifts. The patterns she showed indicate shock, fear, confusion, and something the translator is having trouble identifying. What else could there be besides shock and fear? Taeyang asked bitterly. I do not know. But she stopped the argument before it escalated. She chose to suspend the meeting rather than cancel it entirely. That suggests she is not ready to give up on this diplomatic mission yet. Minji stopped pacing. Which means we have a chance to fix this. Taeyang, you will need to write a formal apology. I will contact our cultural experts on Earth and have them rush through every detail about physical contact in human society. If the Veltharans are willing to try again, we need to be prepared. Taeyang nodded, but inside he felt hollow. He had wanted to make Nari feel welcome, to start their relationship on a positive note. Instead, he had violated her in a way he was only beginning to understand. The look on her face, that moment of utter vulnerability, would haunt him. He wondered if she would ever be able to look at him without remembering that terrible moment. He wondered if he had destroyed any chance they had of understanding each other. Most of all, he wondered what he could possibly say that would make this right. Part 1. First Contact Protocol. Nari stood before the mirror in her private quarters, adjusting the ceremonial sash across her chest for the 3rd time. The silver fabric caught the light of distant stars streaming through the viewport, creating patterns that danced across her skin. Her hands trembled slightly and she forced them to be still. An ambassador of the Veltharan Empire did not show weakness, especially not on a day as important as this. You look perfect, Hana said from the doorway. Her aide had served Nari's family for 2 generations, and her voice carried the warmth of someone who had watched Nari grow from a child into a diplomat. Your mother would be proud. Nari turned away from the mirror. The mention of her mother brought both comfort and pressure. Her mother had been one of the greatest ambassadors in Veltheran history, negotiating treaties with 17 different species without a single breach of protocol. Nari had enormous shoes to fill. "Tell me again about the humans," Nari said, walking to her desk where data tablets were scattered with information about Earth and its people. Hana picked up one of the tablets and scrolled through it. "They are young as species go, only recently admitted to the Galactic Council. Their technology advanced remarkably fast, though their social structures remain somewhat primitive. Primitive how? They form attachments easily. Their emotional responses are strong and often unpredictable. The psychological reports suggest they lack the mental discipline of older species." Hana paused, reading further. "They also have over 200 different nations on their homeworld, each with different customs. It seems they have not yet achieved true unity." Nari absorbed this information. The Veltharans had been united under one empire for 10,000 years. The idea of a fractured world seemed almost impossible to imagine. "What about their greeting protocols?" "That is where the data becomes less clear," Hana admitted. "The Human Diplomatic Corps submitted their formal procedures only last week, and the translation engines are still processing some of the cultural nuances. What we do know is that they value what they call warmth in their interactions. They smile frequently, which shows their teeth. Showing teeth is a threat display in most species, not for humans. For them, it indicates friendliness and pleasure." Hana set down the tablet. "The important thing to remember is our own protocols. You know them perfectly. The synchronized bow at precisely 45 degrees. The recitation of your house lineage going back 7 generations. The presentation of the diplomatic crystal at arm's length. No closer. These rituals have served our people for millennia. As long as you follow them, you cannot fail." Nari nodded, feeling slightly reassured. She had practiced the movements thousands of times. In Veltheran culture, physical distance was sacred. To touch another person who was not family or a bonded partner was unthinkable. The very idea made her skin prickle with discomfort. Even now, she and Hana maintained a respectful space between them, as was proper. Across the station, in the human section, Taeyang was having his own preparation meeting. Commander Minji had called him to her office an hour before the scheduled greeting, and the expression on her face told him this was not going to be a simple briefing. "The Veltheran cultural packet just came through," Minji said, pushing a data pad across her desk. "It is incomplete." Taeyang picked up the pad and scanned through it. There were sections on Veltharan history, their governmental structure, their artistic achievements, but the section on social customs was marked as pending translation. He looked up at his commander. "How incomplete?" "We know the basics. They are formal. They value precision. They have a complex honor system." Minji leaned back in her chair. "What we do not have are the details about physical interaction. The file mentions something about distance protocols, but the specifics did not come through clearly. So we proceed with standard human diplomatic courtesy? That seems wisest. Be respectful. Be warm, but not overly familiar. Follow their lead." Minji studied him for a moment. "You were chosen for this assignment because you are good with first impressions, Taeyang. Your family background and hospitality, your natural friendliness, these are assets. The Veltharans are an old and influential species. Making them feel welcome could open significant opportunities for Earth." Taeyang nodded. He had been working toward this moment for 5 years, ever since humanity had joined the Galactic Council. His parents ran a small hotel in Busan, and he had grown up learning that making guests feel welcomed was the highest art. He carried that philosophy into his diplomatic career. His colleague Dai Wan found him in the preparation room, adjusting his formal jacket. "Nervous?" Taewan asked. "Excited," Taeyang corrected. "This is what we train for. Besides, how different can they be? Every species wants the same basic things. Respect, understanding, friendly relations. The Veltharans have a reputation for being cold. Then maybe they need someone to warm them up a bit," Taeyang said with a smile. He checked his appearance one last time. The formal diplomatic uniform was not as elaborate as what he imagined the Veltharans would wear, but it was dignified and professional. He was ready. The meeting was scheduled for the neutral zone, a section of the station that belonged to neither species. It was a large chamber with high ceilings and windows that looked out onto the stars. Decorations were minimal by design, so as not to favor any particular aesthetic. The lighting was calibrated to be comfortable for a wide range of species. Nari arrived first with her delegation. Hana stood to her right, exactly 3 steps back. 2 guards flanked them at the proper distance, their ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. Nari took her position at the center of the room, her heart beating faster despite her outward calm. She reviewed the protocols in her mind one more time. Bow. Recite. Present. Maintain distance at all times. The doors on the opposite side opened and the human delegation entered. Nari got her first look at a human in person. Taeyang was taller than she expected, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple black uniform with subtle decoration at the shoulders. As he walked forward, his face transformed into what must be the smile Hana had mentioned. It was strange to see, but Nari understood it was meant to be friendly. Taeyang crossed the distance between them with confident strides. Nari prepared to begin the bow, her muscles tensing in the familiar pattern she had practiced. But Taeyang did not slow down. He did not stop at the proper distance. He kept walking forward, his arms beginning to rise from his sides. In the split second before it happened, Nari realized what was about to occur. Her mind screamed in alarm, but her body was frozen in the ritual preparation. She could not move, could not speak, could not do anything except watch as Taeyang stepped into her personal space, his arms opening wide. Then his arms were around her, pulling her into an embrace. The sensation was overwhelming, unlike anything Nari had ever experienced. Warmth radiated from him, seeping through her ceremonial robes. The pressure of his arms across her back sent shocks through her nervous system. Her skin, far more sensitive than human skin, registered every point of contact with intense clarity. The smell of him, something clean and slightly spicy, filled her nostrils. Time seemed to stop. Nari could hear Hana's sharp intake of breath behind her. She could sense the guards moving, their training overriding protocol as they perceived a threat to their ambassador. But above all, she felt the embrace itself, this forbidden thing that was happening to her body. Taeyang's voice came warm and close to her ear. "Welcome. It is an honor to meet you." Nari's chromatic skin, which normally maintained a steady pale blue, began to shift colors rapidly. Shock white bled into fear gray, then flickered with confusion purple and something else, something she had no name for. Her entire worldview was collapsing in this moment. Everything she had been taught, every protocol she had memorized, all of it was useless in the face of this human who was touching her. He was actually touching her. It is how we show care, offer comfort, express joy. A hand on someone's Spart 4. The question of touch. The joint appearance before the Galactic Council went better than anyone expected. Nari and Taeyang stood side by side, maintaining careful distance, and presented a unified message about the importance of cultural understanding. They spoke of how gaps in communication could lead to misunderstandings, and how those misunderstandings could become opportunities for growth. The council representatives seemed satisfied, and the incident was officially declared closed. But for Nari, closing the official matter only opened a deeper, more personal investigation. She could not stop thinking about touch, about what it meant to humans, about what it could mean, about why her own people had built their entire society around avoiding it. She began her research in earnest. Late at night in her quarters, she watched videos of humans interacting. Families at dinner, greeting each other with hugs and kisses, friends walking together, arms linked or hands clasped, couples dancing, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization, children playing, tumbling over each other like puppies. Everywhere she looked, humans were touching, connecting, communicating through physical contact in ways that seemed as natural to them as speaking. She studied their literature next. Love poems that described the sensation of holding hands. Stories where a gentle touch on the cheek conveyed more than 1,000 words. Historical accounts of how physical comfort helped humans endure hardship. Medical research showing that touch released chemicals in the human brain that promoted bonding, reduced stress, and even helped with healing. The more she learned, the more fascinated she became. And the more she began to question her own cultural conditioning. One evening, she requested meetings with other species who had worked alongside humans. The first to respond was Bora, a Krillian engineer who had served on a human vessel for 2 years. They met in a neutral conference room, and Nari got straight to the point. "I understand you have experience working with humans. Can you tell me about their physical contact customs? Bora's antennae twitched with what Nari had learned to recognize as amusement. They touch everything. Each other, their equipment, even me when they forget I am not human. It was disturbing at first. But not later. There was an incident 3 months into my assignment. An explosion in the lower decks. I was trapped behind a bulkhead that had collapsed. I thought I was going to die there, alone in the dark. Then I heard the rescue team, and one of them, a human named Junho, he squeezed through a gap to reach me. The first thing he did was grab my arm. Just held on to it while they worked to free me. He said, "I am here. You are not alone." The touch was frightening, yes, but it was also the most comforting thing I have ever experienced. Did it change how you viewed human contact customs?
It made me understand that for humans, touch is not about disrespect or violation.
It is about presence, about saying with their bodies what their words cannot fully express. I still do not prefer to be touched, but I no longer see it as an insult when they do it. I see it as them sharing their way of caring. Nari thanked Bora and moved on to her next interview. Jin, a Thornian physician, had treated human patients for 5 years. They always want to hold hands during procedures, Jin explained, even simple ones that cause no pain. At first, I thought it was a sign of weakness, that they could not endure discomfort without support, but I came to understand it differently. Humans are social creatures at a very deep level. They draw strength from connection. A human facing difficulty alone is only half as strong as a human facing difficulty while holding the hand of someone they trust. Have you ever tried it? Being held by a human during a difficult moment? Jin's expression shifted to something Nari could not quite read. Once I was very ill with a virus that affects Thornians. I was in the medical bay in significant pain. One of the human doctors, she sat with me for hours. Eventually, she asked if she could hold my hand. I was too weak to refuse, and honestly, I was afraid. But when she did it, when her warm hand closed around mine, something in me settled. The pain did not lessen, but it became more bearable. I have thought about that moment many times since. Nari left those interviews with more questions than answers. She understood intellectually what these other species were telling her, but understanding with her mind was different from understanding with her body, and there was only one way to truly understand what touch meant to humans. She sent a message to Tai Yang. I have a proposal. I would like to conduct a series of cultural exchange sessions. You teach me about human physical contact customs, and I will teach you about Veltheran distance protocols. Both of our governments want to avoid future incidents. This would be valuable research. That was what she told him. What she did not tell him was that she needed to know if that moment during the embrace, that moment when her body had responded in ways her mind did not understand, was unique to him, or if it was something about human touch in general. Taeyang agreed immediately. They met in a specially prepared room that could be configured to allow different levels of proximity. For the first session, they stayed on opposite sides of a table. Let us start with the simplest form of human physical contact, Taeyang said, the handshake. It is a greeting between equals, a gesture of trust. It started in ancient times as a way to show you were not carrying a weapon. Now it is simply how we say hello in formal situations. He demonstrated with holographic projections first, showing the proper grip, the duration, the eye contact that should accompany it. Nari watched carefully, trying to understand not just the mechanics but the meaning behind them. Would you like to try? Taeyang asked. I will not touch you unless you explicitly give permission, and you can stop at any time. Nari's skin flickered with nervousness, but she nodded. Yes, I want to try. Slowly, carefully, she extended her hand across the table. Taeyang reached out to meet her, moving deliberately so she could see everything he was doing. When his palm pressed against hers, when his fingers gently closed around her hand, Nari felt the now familiar shock of sensation. Human skin was warmer than Veltheran skin, slightly rough in texture. The pressure of his grip was firm but not painful. They held the position for a moment, and Taeyang explained. This is saying I see you as an equal. I trust you. I am pleased to meet you. All of that in one simple gesture. It is efficient, Nari admitted. Her skin was showing colors she could not control, but she did not pull away. Our ceremonial bows take minutes. This takes seconds, but your bows are beautiful. They show respect through precision and effort. Neither way is wrong. Over the following weeks, they met regularly. Each session, they explored a different form of human touch. The supportive hand on the shoulder, which Taeyang explained was saying, I am here for you without words. The congratulatory pat on the back, celebrating someone's success. The comforting arm around the shoulders, offering solace in difficult times. With each new form of contact, Nari pushed slightly beyond her comfort zone. And each time she found the experience less frightening than she had expected. More than that, she began to understand why humans valued these gestures so much. There was something in the directness of physical contact, in the immediacy of it that words could never quite match. She also taught Taeyang about Veltharan customs, how they communicated through subtle color shifts in their skin, how their formal bows were like a dance, each movement carrying specific meaning, how distance in their culture was not about coldness, but about respect for individual autonomy. We are taught from childhood that our bodies are our own, she explained during one session, that no one has the right to cross that boundary without explicit permission. It gives us a sense of safety, of control over our own existence. But does it not also make you lonely? Taeyang asked gently. Never being able to reach out in a moment of need? Never feeling the comfort of another person's presence physically? We have our own forms of comfort. Our rituals, our art, our connection through shared understanding. It is different from what humans have, but it is not empty. I did not mean to suggest it was. I am learning that there are many ways to build connection. Touch is the human way, but it is not the only way. These conversations, these careful explorations of each other's customs, built a foundation of understanding between them. But they also built something else, a friendship that existed in the space between their two cultures, incorporating elements of both. Then came the day when Nari received news from home. A message from her brother informed her that their mother had died. The great ambassador, the woman whose legacy Nari had been trying to live up to, was gone. Nari read the message 3 times before it truly sank in. Her mother had been ill for months, but Nari had believed she would recover. Veltharans lived long lives. Her mother was supposed to have decades left, but the illness had been more aggressive than anyone realized. According to Veltharan custom, Nari should grieve alone. She should retire to her quarters, meditate on her mother's life, and process her loss in solitude. That was the proper way, the dignified way, but Nari found she could not do it. Could not face that empty room, that silence, that terrible aloneness. She walked through the station in a daze, not knowing. Part 5. An experiment in understanding Taeyang had learned enough about Veltharan culture to understand the weight of what Nari was asking. This was not a casual request. This was her choosing to violate her own most sacred boundaries because her need for comfort was greater than her need for propriety. Are you sure? He asked quietly. I will stay with you however you need me to. I can sit beside you without touching. I can talk or be silent, but if you truly want to be held, I want you to be certain. Not because you think you should want it, but because you really do. Nari looked at him with eyes that were both vulnerable and determined. I am certain. When you held me that first day, before I understood what was happening, there was a moment when I felt safe. I have thought about that moment every day since. Right now, I need to feel that way again. I need to feel like I'm not alone in this grief. Taeyang stepped closer, moving slowly. Tell me if anything feels wrong. Tell me if you need me to stop. He put his arms around her gently, much more carefully than he had during that first disastrous embrace. This time he was conscious of every point of contact, every boundary he was crossing. He held her loosely, giving her space to pull away if she needed to. For a moment, Nari stood rigid in his arms, her body fighting its conditioning. Then slowly she relaxed into the embrace. She let her head rest against his shoulder. She let herself be held and she cried, not the silent, dignified tears of Veltharan grief, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for her mother, for all the years they would not have together, for all the things left unsaid. And through it all, Taeyang held her. He did not try to stop her tears or tell her it would be okay. He just provided solid, warm presence while she fell apart. When the storm of grief finally passed, Nari did not immediately pull away. She stayed in the circle of Taeyang's arms, feeling his steady breathing, his heart beating against her cheek. This was what humans meant by comfort. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of someone who would witness that pain with you. Thank you, she whispered. You do not need to thank me. I am glad you let me be here. They stood like that for a while longer, and then Nari did step back. Her skin was still showing grief colors, but they were softer now, More peaceful, she looked at Taeyang with something like wonder. My people would say I have shamed myself, that I have betrayed our values by allowing this contact. What do you say? I say that perhaps our values have made us strong but also alone. And maybe there is a different way to be strong, a way that includes connection. In the days that followed, Nari had to face her own delegation. Hana had heard about the embrace through station gossip, and her expression when she confronted Nari was pained. Tell me it is not true. Tell me you did not let the human hold you again. Nari met her aide's eyes steadily. It is true. I was grieving and I needed comfort, and he provided it. I will not apologize for that. The High Council will recall you if they learn of this. They will say you have gone native, that you have forgotten who you are. Have I? Or have I simply learned that there are more ways to be Veltherin than the one narrow path we have always followed? Nari stood straighter. Hana, you have served my family loyally for decades. I am asking you to trust me now. I am not betraying our people. I am trying to help them grow. Hana was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. Your mother was the same way. Always pushing boundaries, always questioning traditions. It terrified me then too. But she was right more often than she was wrong. I will trust you, Nari, but please be careful. Not everyone will be as understanding. Nari knew her aide was right. What she was doing was dangerous, both politically and personally. But she could not stop now. She had opened a door to understanding that she could not close again. She began publishing papers about what she was learning, academic articles about human contact customs, about the psychological and social benefits they derived from physical touch. She was careful in her language, presenting it as objective research rather than personal advocacy. But the implications were clear. She was suggesting that perhaps Veltherin isolation had costs as well as benefits. The response from home was mixed. Younger Veltherins, especially those who had always felt confined by traditional protocols, embraced her work. They started discussion groups about alternative forms of connection. Some even began carefully experimenting with touch among themselves, exploring what it meant to choose physical contact rather than having it forbidden entirely. But the older generation and the traditionalists were horrified. They accused Nari of corrupting Veltherin youth, of undermining thousands of years of culture, of betraying everything their civilization stood for. Calls for her recall grew louder. Through it all, Nari and Taeyang continued their cultural exchange sessions. They had moved beyond the formal research phase into something that felt more like friendship. They met regularly, sometimes to discuss diplomatic matters, sometimes just to talk. One day, Taeyang brought her something from Earth, a small package wrapped in colorful paper. In human culture, we give gifts to people we care about. I thought you might like this. Nari unwrapped it carefully, not wanting to damage the pretty paper. Inside was a book, old-fashioned paper rather than a data tablet. Poetry of Connection read the title. These are poems about relationships, about love and friendship and family. I thought after losing your mother you might find comfort in them. Nari turned the pages, reading phrases here and there. The poems spoke of hands held in darkness, of embraces that felt like coming home, of the small touches that built lifetimes of intimacy. They were beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. Thank you, she said, and without thinking about it, she reached out and squeezed his hand. The gesture felt natural now, this small bridge of contact between them. Taeyang smiled. You have come a long way from the ambassador who stood frozen in shock when I hugged her. I had help. A very patient teacher. Nari closed the book carefully. Can I ask you something? That first day when you embraced me, you said it was how humans greet each other. But you have greeted many other delegates since then, and you did not hug all of them. Why did you hug me? Taeyang considered the question. Honestly? I saw how nervous you were. Your skin was shifting colors, your posture was so rigid. I could tell this was a big moment for you. And I wanted you to feel welcomed, to know that you were among friends. A handshake felt too formal, too distant. I thought an embrace would communicate warmth better. I did not know I was making a terrible mistake. What if it was not a mistake? What if it was exactly what needed to happen? How do you mean? If you had simply bowed or shaken my hand, I would have completed my diplomatic mission here and returned home, probably never to interact with humans again. Our two species would have maintained polite but distant relations. But because you embraced me, because you crossed that boundary, everything changed. I had to understand what happened. I had to learn about your people, about touch, about different ways of connecting, and in learning that, I have begun to question my own culture in ways I never would have otherwise. Are you saying you are glad I accidentally violated your cultural taboos? Ari laughed, a sound that came more easily to her now than it had months ago. I am saying that sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most important growth. You forced me out of my comfort zone, and yes, it was frightening and confusing and wrong in many ways, but it also opened my eyes to possibilities I had never considered. Do you think your people will ever truly accept what you are learning? I do not know. Change is slow, especially for a species as old as mine, but I have to try. I have to show them that we can be Veltheran and still embrace new ways of connecting, that we can honor our traditions while also growing beyond them. Taiyang stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. You know what the hardest thing for me has been? Learning that my way is not the only way. I have spent my whole life believing that touch is essential, that physical connection is a basic need. But watching you maintain your dignity and your connection to your people while keeping that careful distance, seeing how your ceremonies and your color communication can convey just as much meaning as a hug, it has taught me that I was wrong. Touch is essential for humans, but it is not essential for everyone. And yet I have learned that it can be valuable even for those of us who were taught to avoid it. Perhaps the truth is that both our peoples have something important and neither of us has the complete answer. A diplomatic response if I ever heard one. I am a diplomat. It is what I do. Nari joined him at the window. They stood side by side, not touching but comfortable in each other's presence. Taiyang, can I tell you something? About that day my mother died when you held me while I cried. Of course. That was the first time since I was a small child that anyone had held me like that. The first time in over 20 years that I felt physical comfort from another person, and it was one of the most important moments of my life. Not because it erased my grief, but because it reminded me that I did not have to carry it alone. That is something my people have lost somewhere in our history. The knowledge that vulnerability can be strength when shared with someone who cares.